She thought it was just a night of music. Instead, it became a night of betrayal. The night air outside Madison Square Garden buzzed with electricity. Neon lights blinked in crimson and violet, echoing the promise of sound that pulsed inside the stadium. Thousands of fans pressed forward, their laughter and chatter building like a wave about to crash. But Amelia Clark stood still, clutching two slips of glossy paper in her trembling hand. The tickets gleamed under the lights, embossed with the name of her favorite band, Starlight Anthem. Amelia was 26, a high school English teacher from Queens. She had marked this night in her calendar for months. It wasn't just another concert. It was supposed to be a small reclaiming of joy after heartbreak. She had saved carefully, turned down nights out with colleagues, and told her students, "Next Monday, you'll hear about the show of a lifetime." But now? Standing at the gate, her smile was gone. The security attendant, a man in his 40s with tired eyes, took her ticket and fed it into the scanner. A sharp, metallic beep split the night. He frowned, scanned it again. The same beep, short, final, unforgiving. "I'm sorry, miss," he said, lowering his voice as the crowd surged around them. "Your ticket is fake." "Ah," Amelia blinked. "What? No, there must be a mistake." She tried to laugh it off, as if charm or politeness could coax the machine into changing its verdict. But the attendant shook his head, ripping the ticket neatly down the middle. The pieces fluttered downward. One fragment clung to her shoe. The camera of fate seemed to zoom in, revealing a single word stamped in red across the glossy paper: Vide, Vide. That night, the word Vide wasn't just on a ticket. It was on trust. Behind her, impatient fans grumbled, pushing past. Ahead of her, the music swelled as lucky ticket holders streamed inside. Amelia stood frozen, the word fake echoing louder than the crowd's roar. This wasn't just a scam. It was a crack in the justice system waiting to echo. She stumbled back from the gate, phone in hand. The contact at the top of her screen read, "Well, Jason Miller.s. Jason, her ex. The man she had once planned a future with. He had texted weeks earlier, out of the blue, 'I know you still love Starlight Anthem. I've got tickets. Don't miss this chance.'" Amelia had hesitated, but he had pressed. "We don't have to talk. Just a transaction. 2 seats. Face value." It had seemed harmless. She wanted closure, maybe even proof that two adults could coexist without bitterness. So she wired him the money, $320, every cent accounted for. And in return, he sent her the tickets. He wanted to believe. Well, she needed to believe. Now, outside the stadium, belief looked like shredded paper at her feet. She dialed Jason, once. Twice. He didn't answer. On the third attempt, his voice came, casual, amused. "Amelia, what's with the panic calls? Band not loud enough for you?" Her throat tightened. Jason, the tickets were fake. They just ripped them in half in front of me." There was a pause. Then a laugh, low, mocking. "Relax, Amelia. You always overreact. It's just a show. Maybe next time you'll learn not to leave me." His words cut sharper than the ticket stub. The crowd behind her erupted in cheers as the band struck its opening chord, but Amelia heard only the echo of his cruelty. She wanted to scream. She wanted to cry. But instead, she stood still, phone pressed to her ear, letting the silence hang like an unanswered question. The narrator whispered again. She thought betrayal was private. "No!" But betrayal has a way of going public. Amelia left the gates. She sat on the curb, students' faces flickering in her mind. How could she walk into class on Monday and explain why her voice was hoarse, not from singing, but from swallowing shame? She imagined the conversations that would ripple. She got scammed by her ex. How naive can you be? Shame was heavy, but beneath it, anger stirred. For a teacher, trust was currency. Every day she asked her students to trust her, to read Shakespeare's sonnets with open hearts, to see metaphors where others saw only ink. Tonight, her own trust had been auctioned off, and Jason had pocketed the profit. It wasn't just about her. It was about every person who had ever wired money, clicked confirm, or said yes to someone they should have been able to count on. It was about how easily affection could become a weapon. A gust of wind scattered the shredded pieces of her ticket down the street. One fragment landed near a boy selling glow sticks. He picked it up, squinting at the red letters. "Lady," he said, "this says VOI'd. That means trash." Amelia looked at the boy, at the ticket, at the crowd streaming inside. Then she whispered to herself, though no one else could hear. "No, it means proof." In an age where money moved faster than conscience, scams were no longer back-alley cons. They were intimate betrayals dressed as everyday transactions. A fake ticket wasn't just paper. It was evidence of how love could be exploited, how personal trust could be turned into public humiliation. The neon lights flickered above, pulsing like a lie told over and over. And beneath those lights, Amelia realized something dangerous. This night wasn't the end of her humiliation. It was the beginning of Jason's reckoning. She stood, brushing the dust off her skirt, eyes hardening. The narrator closed the scene. Justice doesn't always begin with a gavel. Sometimes, it begins with a torn piece of paper stuck to your shoe. Amelia Clark had always believed in the written word. At 26, she carried the calm certainty of someone who found solace in literature sonnets, novels, essays scribbled in margins. To her students at Roosevelt High School in Queens, she wasn't just Ms. Clark. She was the teacher who turned Shakespeare into rap battles, who compared The Great Gatsby to Instagram culture, who made the classroom feel alive. But behind her steady voice, Amelia carried fractures. The end of a 4-year relationship had left her sleepless, her nights heavy with replayed arguments and questions that had no answers. She had told herself that teaching was enough, that the applause of her students could stitch over the silence of an empty apartment. She almost believed it until the night Jason Miller sold her fake tickets. Jason Miller was 28, a self-proclaimed entrepreneur who called himself a salesman of possibilities. To his friends at the local bar, he was the guy with slick hair and sharper words, someone who always had a hustle in his back pocket. He wore cheap cologne-like armor and carried his arrogance like a second wallet. To Amelia, once upon a time, Jason had been charming. He had shown up at her open mic poetry reading with flowers and jokes that made her laugh until her ribs ached. For years, they built a life together. Shared playlists, shared rent, shared secrets whispered at midnight. But where Amelia found comfort in structure, Jason craved control. When the relationship collapsed, it wasn't a clean break. Jason left with bitterness, with a taste for revenge disguised as nonchalance. To him, selling Amelia fake tickets wasn't just petty fraud, it was performance. "I mean, what's a couple of fake tickets?" he once told a drinking buddy, smirking as he sipped his whiskey. "She'll cry, then she'll move on. They always do." But underneath, the tension pulsed with something larger. Their breakup wasn't just personal. It was a collision between values, ooth versus manipulation, justice versus mockery. On Monday morning, the concert still echoed in Amelia's mind. Not the music she missed, but the humiliation she carried. She stood in front of her class, chalk in hand, trying to focus on a passage from Othello. "Who steals my purse, steals trash," she read aloud. "But he that filches from me my good name robs me of that which not enriches him, and makes me poor indeed." The words trembled in the air. A student in the back raised his hand. "Miss Clark, are you okay?" She blinked, forced to smile. Literature has a way of sounding too real sometimes, doesn't it? The room chuckled, but her heart sank. She knew what it felt like to have her name stolen, her dignity marked. Void. That afternoon, she sat in the principal's office. Mr. Collins, a man in his 60s with silver hair and a voice that carried the weight of decades, leaned across his desk. He had been her mentor since her first year of teaching. "Ms. Clark," he said gently, "word travels fast. I heard about what happened Saturday night." Her cheeks flushed. "I don't want my personal life to become faculty gossip." Collins shook his head. "This isn't gossip, it's injustice. And injustice doesn't stop at the school gates." She looked at him, torn between pride and pain. "It's embarrassing. I let myself trust someone I shouldn't have. He smiled, not unkindly. Teaching is about proof every day. You stand in front of your students and show them that words matter. Don't let lies mark your name. If he thinks he can reduce you to a punchline, he's wrong. You're more than that. Amelia's throat tightened. For the first time since the humiliation at the concert, she felt seen, not as a victim, but as a fighter who hadn't yet realized her own strength. Meanwhile, Jason thrived on the story. At the bar, he leaned back in his chair, basking in the laughter of his friends. She actually wired me the money, he bragged, tapping his phone. $300, straight into my account. Didn't even question it. A friend raised his glass. Cold, man. That's cold. Jason smirked. No, that's power. That's what people don't get. Power isn't about money. It's about proving you still own the narrative. And I own hers. His words dripped with arrogance, but beneath the bravado lurked something fragile. A fear that Amelia's independence meant he was irrelevant. Selling her fake tickets was his way of proving she was still orbiting his world. He thought a fake ticket would keep her small. He didn't realize it would open a courtroom door wide enough for the whole city to see. Back in her apartment, Amelia sat surrounded by essays to grade, yet her eyes lingered on her phone. Jason's mocking words replayed in her head, "Maybe next time you'll learn not to leave me." The humiliation burned, but so did resolve. She thought of her students, of the quote she had read aloud in class. "Who steals my purse, steals trash, but he that filches from me my good name." Jason hadn't just stolen money. He had tried to strip her of dignity. And dignity, Amelia decided, was not for sale. Her resolve hardened further when an email appeared in her inbox. Fraud victim. Support group, meeting Wednesday. It was a community workshop run by young attorney Rachel Owens, who specialized in consumer fraud. Amelia hovered over the RSVP button. She clicked, yes. At school the next day, Colin stopped by her classroom. Heading to that workshop? Amelia nodded, clutching her notebook. I don't know if I have a case. It feels small. Collins placed a hand on the doorframe. Nothing is small when truth is at stake. Remember that. In Jason's world, lies were entertainment. In Amelia's, lies were wounds. And soon, those two worlds would collide under the fluorescent lights of a courtroom. Amelia walking down the dim hallway of Roosevelt High, papers under her arm, determination in her step. Jason miles away, raising his glass in mock celebration. One teacher, one hustler. The narrator's final whisper of the section. One believed proof was everything. The other believed proof could be forged. Only a judge would decide which belief would survive. The concert lights had dimmed, the music roaring inside the stadium. Outside, Amelia Clark sat on the curb with the wind tugging at her hair. Her phone screen glowed against the night, Jason's name burning at the top. She pressed call. The dial tone rang once, twice, 3 times. Each chime was not just a ring, it was an accusation. Finally, Jason answered. His voice was too calm, too amused. Amelia. What's with the panic calls? Band not loud enough for you? Her grip tightened. Jason, did you know these tickets were fake? A pause. Then a short laugh, as if he had been waiting for the question. Relax. You always overreact. Maybe next time you'll learn not to leave me. The words landed like a slap. Around her, fans streamed into the arena, shouting with joy as the band launched into their first chorus. Waventendi, the contrast was unbearable. Thousands celebrating, one woman unraveling. Jason, she whispered, her voice breaking, you stole from me. No, he replied smoothly. I just reminded you who's in control. $300. That's nothing. You'll cry tonight, then you'll move on. They always do. The line went dead. The phone slipped from her hand and clattered on the pavement. For a moment, Amelia sat in silence, the neon sign overhead flickering. The echo of his words hollowed her chest. Next time you'll learn not to leave me. Oh, this wasn't about music. It wasn't even about money. It was about punishment. His need to remind her she had walked away. She gathered the shredded ticket from the ground. One half had stuck to her shoe. The red letters glaring up. Vide D. She stuffed the pieces into her bag as if preserving evidence. Her instincts as a teacher told her something important. Paper mattered. Proof mattered. At home, long after midnight, Amelia scrolled back through old messages with Jason. She had tried not to read them since the breakup. But now her eyes combed through each word, searching for something she had missed. And then she saw it. A text from months earlier. I could sell you air and you'd still believe me. Her breath caught. She remembered brushing it off back then, dismissing it as a cruel joke. Like prophecy, he had sold her air, and she had paid for it. She printed the message, the ink stark against the page. The words felt heavier than paper, like a weight pressing against her chest. Narrator's voice slid in, low and steady. She could have swallowed the humiliation. But betrayal has a way of writing its own subpoena. In the days that followed, Amelia moved through her classes like a ghost. She graded essays, answered questions, but her mind replayed the call, the laughter, the word vide stamped across her trust. At lunch, her colleague Ms. Patel noticed the dark circles under her eyes. Are you all right, Amelia? You look somewhere else. Amelia forced a smile. Just tired. But the truth gnawed at her. This wasn't just personal heartbreak. Jason had taken money under false pretenses. That was fraud. Fraud wasn't private. It was criminal. One evening, as rain pattered against her apartment window, Amelia sat with her laptop. She typed, "Fraud Legal Definition, New York," into the search bar. Eanes flooded the screen. Fraud. Intentional deception for personal gain. Her pulse quickened. If this wasn't just betrayal, it was a crime. The phone buzzed again. Another message from Jason. Hope you enjoyed the show. Guess you'll think twice before messing with me. Ugh. Her hands trembled. She wanted to delete it, to scrub every trace of him from her phone. But instead, she saved it. Proof. That night, she dreamed of standing in a courtroom. The judge banged the gavel, and instead of wood, the sound was that same beep from the ticket scanner. Around her, Jason laughed, tossing shredded tickets into the air like confetti. She woke with her heart pounding, realizing that the dream was not about fear. It was about a future she couldn't avoid. At school, her students unknowingly sharpened her resolve. One morning, during a discussion on To Kill a Mockingbird, a student named Daniel asked, "Miss Clark, why do people lie if they know the truth will come out?" Amelia froze, the chalk trembling in her hand. She thought of Jason's smug voice, his words dripping with arrogance. Then she answered, quietly but firmly, because lies give them power. Until someone stands up and says no more. The classroom fell silent. Daniel scribbled notes. Amelia's chest tightened. She realized she wasn't just teaching them literature. She was rehearsing her own truth. She thought betrayal was private. But betrayal has a way of going public. That evening, she sat again with Principal Collins. He leaned forward, his eyes sharp but kind. "You're holding something back," he said. Amelia sighed, pulling the shredded ticket from her bag, then the printed text. "I could sell you air, and you'd still believe me." Collins studied the page, then met her eyes. "This isn't just cruelty. It's evidence." Her lips trembled. "What if people say it's just a breakup? Just revenge?" He shook his head. "Fraud doesn't care about romance. The law doesn't excuse theft because the thief once said, 'I love you.'" Amelia felt the weight of his words settle into her. For weeks, she had been treating this as humiliation to hide. But Collins was right. This wasn't just her shame, it was Jason's crime. Later that night, she drafted a message to Rachel Owens, the attorney running the fraud workshop she had signed up for. She typed, erased, then retyped, "My name is Amelia Clark. I was scammed by my ex-boyfriend. I have proof, bank transfers, text messages, and witnesses. I don't know if I have a case, but I want to try." Her finger hovered, then pressed send. Jason's fake ticket scheme was more than a lover's spite. It was financial fraud, weaponizing intimacy as camouflage. Amelia's journey from silence to action revealed a larger truth. In the digital age, betrayal wasn't confined to hearts. It lived in bank records, in screenshots, in the fragile threads of trust that could become courtroom evidence. Amelia closed her laptop, her face reflected faintly in the dark screen. For the first time since that night, she didn't look broken. Oh, she looked resolute. She whispered into the silence. Oh, no more air, only proof. For 2 days, Amelia Clark carried the silence like an anchor. She taught her classes, graded essays, answered questions with the automatic rhythm of a teacher who knew her lines. But inside, she was hollow. Every time she looked at her students, she felt the sting of hypocrisy. She had built a career teaching them that truth mattered, that words had weight, that integrity was not optional. Yet here she was, swallowing lies, letting Jason's betrayal fester unchecked. On Wednesday morning, during a discussion of poetry, a hand shot up in the back of the room. It was Sarah, one of her brightest students. "Miss Clark," Sarah asked innocently, "why are you sad? Didn't the concert make you happy?" Dozens of eyes turned toward her. Amelia's throat closed. She tried to conjure a smile, but Sarah's earnest gaze pierced through every wall she had built. In that moment, Amelia knew silence was no longer an option. To remain quiet would not only betray herself, it would betray the very lessons she tried to pass on. That evening, she sat in front of her mirror. The apartment was dim, a single lamp casting a circle of light across the desk. From her bag, she pulled out the shredded remains of the concert ticket. Her hands trembled as she arranged the torn pieces on the desk like fragments of a crime scene. One by one, she pressed strips of tape across the seams. Slowly, the ticket reformed, scarred with translucent lines. She stared at it in the mirror, the word "Vide A" still slashed across its surface, but whole again. It was no longer a ticket to music. It was evidence. Her reflection seemed to whisper back at her, "If proof is all I have left, then proof is enough." The next day, Amelia walked into a modest office in downtown Manhattan. The nameplate read, "Rachel Owens, Attorney at Law." Rachel was in her early 30s, with sharp eyes and a quiet confidence that filled the room. Amelia sat down across from her, clutching a folder stuffed with papers. Rachel leaned forward. "Tell me what happened." Amelia recounted everything. The text messages, the money transfer, the humiliation at the gate, the mocking phone call afterward. Her voice shook at times, but she did not stop. When she finished, she opened the folder, spreading the documents across the desk, bank records, screenshots of Jason's messages, and the taped ticket sealed in a plastic sleeve. Rachel studied them carefully, nodding. Then she looked Amelia in the eye. "You have proof? Messages? Bank transfers?" Amelia's reply was steady. Every word, every cent. Rachel's lips curved into something that was not quite a smile, more a mark of recognition. "Then you have more than a story. You have a case." For a moment, Amelia felt her chest expand, as though the air was lighter. It wasn't relief. Jason's shadow still lingered, but it was the first breath of defiance she had taken in days. "Why do you want to do this?" Rachel asked softly. "Because this isn't easy. Trials take time. They take courage. You'll be questioned, doubted, even mocked. So why?" Amelia thought of Sarah's question in class, of the way her students looked at her, of the principle she had taught 100 times, integrity above all. "Because it's not just me," Amelia said firmly. "If he can do this to me, he can do it to anyone. Someone has to stop him." Rachel nodded slowly. "Then let's stop him." That night, Amelia returned home, exhaustion heavy on her shoulders. But for the first time, the weight did not feel like defeat. It felt like armor. She pinned the reconstructed ticket above her desk, taped lines glowing under the lamplight. It looked ugly, fractured, scarred, but it also looked indestructible. She whispered to herself again, "If proof is all I have left, then proof is enough." In that moment, she stopped being the victim of a scam and became the architect of a case. Betrayal had taken her voice. Proof would give it back. In the days that followed, Amelia began to shift. She collected every text message into folders, organized her bank statements, and rehearsed her account of the night with Rachel. Each step stripped Jason's power from her piece by piece. He thought he had reduced her to humiliation. Instead, he had given her ammunition. Meanwhile, Jason bragged to his friends, laughing off Amelia's meltdown. "She won't do anything," he scoffed. "She's too proud. She'll cry in her classroom and then pretend nothing happened. They always do." But he was wrong. This was the pivot point. The instant when personal heartbreak transformed into a public stand. Amelia was no longer just a woman scorned by an ex. She was a citizen demanding justice. Her choice echoed the larger truth of the digital age. Scams and betrayals thrive, not because they are clever, but because victims stay silent. By refusing silence, Amelia shifted from private shame to public reckoning. The camera of the story lingered once more on the taped ticket, jagged lines illuminated under the lamp. The narrator's voice settled like a gavel. Proof may be fragile, proof may be scarred, but proof, once held to the light, is stronger than any lie. The first headline appeared 3 days after Amelia filed her claim. Ex sold fake tickets to his former girlfriend. Now she's fighting back. The article ran on a local news blog, but by evening, larger outlets picked it up. Cable channels debated it on late-night panels. Talk radio hosts asked, "Is this love gone wrong, or a lesson in fraud?" By the weekend, tabloid covers blared across newsstands. "Just love. Scam or just a lover's spat." Amelia Clark's face, lifted from her school's website, appeared beside Jason Miller's mug-like photo, pulled from his social media account. Strangers suddenly had opinions on their relationship. Commenters dissected her smile, his smirk, their history. On Twitter and TikTok, clips of Amelia leaving the courthouse swirled through timelines. In one video, a reporter asked, "Miss Clark, is this about heartbreak or justice?" Amelia, clutching a folder of evidence, looked straight into the camera and answered, "It's about proof. Heartbreak is private. Fraud is not." The clip was watched 2 million times in 24 hours. Jason, meanwhile, played his role as villain with careless arrogance. He gave an interview to a gossip site, leaning back in his chair, sunglasses on indoors. "She's just bitter," he sneered. "I never forced her to buy anything. People break up, they move on. She should too. I sold her tickets. If she didn't check them, that's on her." The article's headline quoted him directly, "She's bitter. That's all." His words lit the comment sections like gasoline. Half of the responses were mocking Amelia. "Girl, you bought tickets from your ex? Rookie mistake. Sounds like revenge dressed up as justice." The other half rallied behind her. "Bitter. No, this is fraud. Don't blame the victim." Esque. Scams hide in plain sight until someone calls them out. Good for her. Amelia scrolled through the comments late one night, her stomach twisting. She wanted to close the apps, to hide from the noise. But then a notification popped up, a new hashtag trending in New York. Void trust. It started with a single post. Saw. The story of the teacher scammed by her ex. Made me think of the time I bought fake plane tickets online. Different scam. Same humiliation. Void trust. Others joined. Stories poured out. Fraudulent loans, fake charity collections, digital romance scams. Screenshots of forged receipts and broken promises filled the feed. By morning, Void Trust had climbed into the national trending list. Amelia was no longer just a name in a headline, she had become a symbol. With attention came retaliation. One evening, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Drop the case, or the whole town will laugh at you." Her chest tightened. She read it again, hands shaking. Another message followed minutes later. "Teachers don't belong in court. Go back to your classroom." She sat frozen in her apartment, staring at the glowing screen. For the first time, fear slithered past her resolve. If Jason wasn't behind it, then who? Did someone else want her silence? The next morning, she showed the messages to Rachel Owens. Rachel read them with a practiced calm. Intimidation. It's illegal. We'll add it to the file. Amelia's voice quivered. What if they're right? What if the town laughs at me? She leaned forward and let them laugh. Because when the trial ends, they won't be laughing at you. They'll be laughing at him. Amelia swallowed hard, but nodded. Jason doubled down in public. He posted a video on Instagram, standing in front of a luxury car he didn't own. Look, I sell stuff. That's who I am. Sometimes people don't get what they expect. That's life. Crying about it doesn't change the game. Clark needs to get over it. The video went viral, not for his defense, but for the arrogance dripping from every word. Users stitched the clip with Amelia's quieter interviews, comparing his smirk with her steady tone. The contrast was damning. One evening, as Amelia left school, a young woman approached her nervously at the gate. "Miss Clark, I saw your story online." Amelia blinked. The girl couldn't have been more than 22. She clutched her phone like a lifeline. "I dated Jason too," she said quickly. "He sold me fake festival passes last year. Said he had a hookup. I lost $500. When I confronted him, he laughed in my face. I didn't tell anyone. I was too ashamed." She pulled up screenshots on her phone messages identical to Amelia's. Payments, the same pattern of deceit. Amelia's chest tightened. It wasn't just her. It never had been. "Would you testify?" Amelia asked softly. The girl hesitated, then nodded. "If you stand up there first." What began as a lover's quarrel unraveled into a pattern of fraud. His arrogance wasn't just personal. It was systematic. The revelation transformed the case. Rachel filed motions to include the new witness. The press seized on the development. Headlines shifted. Fake tickets were no one off. Others stepped forward. Public opinion began to tilt. The hashtag Void Trust surged again, now joined by new ones. Proof not promises. Justice for Amelia. But the more the public sided with her, the more Jason seethed. In a bar interview, caught on a hidden phone camera, he snarled, "She's trying to ruin me. All because I sold her a couple of tickets? What's next? Jail for every lie a boyfriend tells." His friends laughed nervously, but the recording leaked online. It painted him not as a victim of overreaction, but as a man mocking justice itself. Amelia sat in her apartment, scrolling through the tidal wave of reactions. Strangers wrote to her. "See. Thank you for standing up. I was scammed once, and I thought it was my fault. Tass. You're brave for turning humiliation into evidence." Chi. For the first time, she realized the case wasn't just hers. She was carrying hundreds of voices with her into the courtroom. Classy. Still, the toll was real. She lost sleep. She jumped at every unknown number. In the hallways of her school, some parents whispered, questioning why a teacher would drag her private life into court. Others stopped her to shake her hand. The town itself split down the middle. The conflict was no longer about Amelia and Jason. It had become a referendum on power and accountability. Some saw Amelia as a cautionary tale, others as a hero. The divide reflected society itself. How quickly people dismiss fraud as mistakes. How often women are blamed for trusting. How rarely personal scams are taken seriously until someone forces the system to look. In one of their last pre-trial meetings, Rachel laid the evidence across the table. The bank transfer, the mocking texts, the reconstructed ticket, and now, the second woman's testimony. "Yeah." Rachel looked at Amelia. "You realize what this means?" Amelia nodded. "It means he didn't just sell me air. He's been selling air to everyone." Rachel leaned back, satisfied. "And now we have the proof." He thought the lie would end at the gate. Instead, it spread through the wires of the internet, through the mouths of witnesses, through the cracks of his own arrogance. What began as one night of betrayal had become a storm too large to silence. The courthouse steps were a swarm of cameras. Reporters shouted questions, microphones thrust forward as if they were weapons. Inside, the air was even heavier. Gallery overflowed, journalists scribbling notes, curious locals clutching seats. Students who had once whispered poems in Amelia Clark's classroom, now whispering about justice. The judge's gavel cracked at precisely 9 a.m. M. Order in the court. The trial of Clark v. Miller had begun. Amelia sat at the plaintiff's table beside Rachel Owens. She wore a simple navy dress, her hair pinned back, hands folded tightly in her lap. Jason Miller lounged at the defense table, smirk plastered across his face, suit too shiny under the fluorescent lights. He raised a hand casually to wave at the cameras, as though this were a press conference and not a trial. The narrator's voice cut softly over the scene. He thought this was theater. He did not realize the curtain was about to close. The prosecution's first move was clinical. Rachel stood, walking calmly to the center of the courtroom. Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, what we will show you is not heartbreak. We will show you proof bank transfers, messages, and admissions. Proof that the defendant did not simply make a mistake. He planned a fraud. Jason's lawyer, a sharp-suited man named Briggs, responded with a scoff. My client is guilty of nothing but generosity. These tickets were a gift. What she chooses to believe afterward is not his burden. The first gasp rippled through the gallery. The lines were drawn. Rachel called the first witness, a bank representative. He confirmed that Amelia had wired Jason exactly 3:20 on the date in question, labeled concert tickets. Rachel lifted the printout for the jury to see. Not a gift, a payment. Briggs rose, feigning outrage. People transfer money to their loved ones all the time. Are we to criminalize every Venmo transaction between exes? The judge lifted a brow. Counselor, sit down. Next, Rachel displayed a series of messages on the projector. The jurors leaned forward as Jason's words glowed across the screen. Hope you enjoyed the show. Guess you'll think twice before messing with me. And the older one? From months earlier, I could sell you air, and you'd still believe me. The words hung in silence, damning in their arrogance. Briggs tried to pivot. Jokes. These are jokes taken out of context. Rachel's reply was swift. Then why did he also write? She clicked to the next slide. She deserved it for leaving me. Gasps echoed across the room. Then came the visual that cemented the narrative. Rachel walked to the evidence table, lifted a transparent sleeve containing the reconstructed ticket tape scars visible under the light. She raised it high for the jury to see. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not paper. This is proof. This is betrayal printed in ink. The silence was thunderous. Even the cameras seemed to hold their breath. Finally, it was Amelia's turn. She rose, hand trembling only slightly as she was sworn in. The courtroom seemed to lean forward collectively as she took the stand. Miss Clark, why did you bring this case? Amelia's voice was soft at first, but it grew steadier with each word. Because silence doesn't keep you safe. Proof does. The sentence cut through the air like a blade. For a moment, not even the reporters moved. Rachel nodded, giving her space. What did you feel, standing at the gate with that ticket in your hand? Amelia's throat tightened. Humiliated, betrayed, but most of all, I felt powerless. That's why I'm here. To prove none of us are powerless when we choose truth. The gallery was still. The jurors scribbled notes furiously. Briggs stormed forward, circling Amelia like a hawk. Ms. Clark, isn't it true you willingly sent money to my client? Yes, Amelia answered calmly. And isn't it true he never forced you to do so? Yes. Briggs smirked. So you admit this was voluntary? A gift, not a scam. Amelia met his gaze. Could admit, I trusted him, and he exploited that trust with lies. That's fraud. The jurors' heads bobbed in quiet agreement. Briggs faltered. When Jason finally took the stand, the room shifted. He leaned back, one leg crossed, posture oozing disdain. Briggs began softly, guiding him. Jason, did you ever intend to hurt Amelia? Jason smirked. Of course not. I gave her tickets. If she couldn't use them, that's her problem. Did you consider them a gift? Yes. A generous one. Rachel rose swiftly. Then why write? She deserved it for leaving me. Jason hesitated, then sneered. Because she did. She left. She thought she was better than me. I wanted to teach her a lesson. A ripple surged through the courtroom. The jurors stiffened. Rachel pressed. So you admit it was intentional? Not a misunderstanding? Not a joke? A punishment? Oh, Jason's jaw tightened. Call it what you want. Everyone sells dreams. I just sold mine in ink. The words slicked out like poison. Gasps erupted again. A juror shook his head in disbelief. Rachel's voice sharpened. So you admit the tickets were fake? Jason snapped. Yeah, I did it. She had it coming. The gallery exploded in murmurs. The judge banged the gavel. Order, order in the court. Oh, but the damage was done. Jason's arrogance had detonated his defense. The jury had heard it from his own mouth. Closing arguments. Rachel faced the jury with calm intensity. This case is not about heartbreak. It's about fraud. When trust becomes a weapon, when lies become transactions, society must answer. Amelia Clark is not the only victim, but today, she is the one brave enough to bring proof into the light. Remember her words, silence doesn't keep you safe. Proof does. Briggs stumbled through his closing, muttering about relationships, bitterness, and misunderstandings. But the jury's faces were already carved in stone. Hours later, the jury returned. The foreperson stood, paper trembling in her hand. In the matter of Clark v. Miller, we find the defendant liable for fraud. Damages awarded, full restitution plus punitive damages. The gavel struck like thunder. Jason slumped in his chair, the smirk finally gone. Amelia closed her eyes, a single tear sliding down, not of sorrow, but release. The trial was not won by eloquence alone. It was won by proof cold, documented, undeniable. But more than that, it was Jason's arrogance that sealed his fate. His belief that lies were harmless, that betrayal was sport, became the rope he used to hang his defense. The narrator's final voice in the courtroom. Justice does not need fireworks. Sometimes, it only needs a liar too arrogant to stop talking. The words of the jury still echoed in the air when the gavel came down, liable for fraud. Full restitution plus punitive damages. Jason Miller froze in his seat, his smirk finally evaporating. Amelia Clark sat motionless beside Rachel Owens, her hands clasped tightly together. The courtroom was silent for a heartbeat, then erupted into whispers, the shuffle of reporters racing for the door, the click of cameras already preparing headlines. For Amelia, it wasn't about the numbers. The restitution would cover the stolen money. The punitive damages would sting Jason's bank account. But the real weight was not in dollars. It was in words. The law had declared him what he truly was. A fraud. When the judge adjourned, Jason shoved his chair back with a scrape, eyes darting to the cameras. For the first time, he looked cornered. No more sunglasses, no rehearsed smirk. Just a man stripped of his armor. As he walked out, the gallery erupted. People jeered, their voices rising in contempt. Scammer. Coward. The once cocky salesman now kept his head down, jaw clenched, trying to push past the crowd. The flash of cameras was blinding. Dozens of phones rose into the air. Each click of the shutter burst like a firecracker, until the corridor outside the courtroom dissolved into a storm of white light. The narrator's voice cut in, steady and unforgiving. At the gate of the concert, her ticket had been stamped "Vide." Today, it was his name marked "Void-E," written not in red ink, but in the judgment of a community. By nightfall, news outlets across the country carried the story. Vage. Fake ticket scam becomes real justice. 2020. Teacher wins fraud case against ex-boyfriend, proof, not silence. Each A's romance scam meets its reckoning in court. Number SD Sixers, which week C, CCCs, Bodo porting Pertixers, 40cc Aspercies, fresh kest. One line, in particular, spread like wildfire. Silence doesn't keep you safe. Proof does. TikTok edits layered the sentence over dramatic music. Twitter threads dissected the case, turning it into a rallying cry. While Jason drowned under the lights of mockery, Amelia slipped out through a side door with Rachel. She didn't crave applause. She didn't want to pose for cameras. She wanted air, free of judgment and noise. On the courthouse steps, a small crowd waited anyway. A former student rushed forward, hugging her tightly. "You showed them, Miss Clark. You showed all of us." Amelia blinked back tears. For the first time, the humiliation she had carried felt lighter, replaced by something sturdier. Not triumph, resolve. Jason walked alone down the courthouse stairs. His so-called friends who had laughed with him at bars, who had once egged on his arrogance, were nowhere to be seen. Alone in the strobe of flashing lights, he looked smaller, diminished. Someone shouted, "Sell us air now, Jason." The crowd erupted in laughter. He shoved his way forward, but the jeers followed like a shadow. That image, Jason's bowed head under the storm of cameras, flooded the internet within minutes. Things appeared instantly. A picture of the VID ticket stamped across his forehead. GIFs, looping his courtroom outburst. "Yeah, I did it. She had it coming." His arrogance had become his indictment. The contrast was searing. At the concert gates, Amelia had stood alone, humiliated under neon lights, her ticket torn and stamped VOI'd. Now, Jason stood alone outside the courthouse, drowning in the blinding flash of cameras. The narrator's voice returned. The night she was left outside, the crowd rushed in without her. Tonight, the crowd rushed out without him. The hashtag #VoidTrust surged again, this time linked to videos of Jason's defeat. Victims of romance scams, once silent, began speaking out. On Instagram, a woman wrote, "I once wired money to someone I thought loved me. I stayed quiet for years. Not anymore. Thank you, Amelia. Void trust." Forums for consumer protection cited the case. News anchors debated whether fraud penalties were strong enough when emotional manipulation was involved. Legal scholars weighed in. This isn't just about fake tickets. It's about the misuse of intimacy for financial gain. Courts are beginning to recognize romance scams as not just personal tragedies, but legal violations. Petitions began circulating, demanding stricter penalties for romance fraud. Lawmakers in New York hinted at drafting new proposals. The Clark v. Miller case was cited as the spark. The following week, Amelia returned to Roosevelt High. Her students greeted her with applause, but she raised her hand gently. "We don't clap for justice. We carry it forward." On the blackboard, she wrote one word in capital letters, PROF. "Literature teaches us that words can lie," she told the class. But proof, the evidence we hold in our hands, is what the world cannot ignore. Don't ever let anyone convince you that silence is safer. Her students scribbled furiously, eyes wide, as if the lesson mattered more than any exam. Broader meaning. The aftermath was no longer just Amelia's story. It was a community's. The trial reminded people that fraud doesn't always wear a ski mask or sneak through the internet. Sometimes it wears a smile, whispers, "I love you," and then sells you air. And air, Amelia proved, can be turned into evidence. The verdict was not about punishing Jason alone. It was about setting precedent. About showing that personal relationships cannot be shields for deception, that romance is not a loophole in the law. The narrator's commentary closed over the image of Jason's solitary figure, flashes erupting like fireworks behind him. Justice was never about the money. It was about the message. Love can forgive mistakes. The law cannot forgive fraud. Jason disappeared into the night, swallowed by his own infamy. The cameras turned away from him eventually, their light seeking brighter stories. But the scar remained, a public record, a verdict etched into law. Amelia, meanwhile, walked back into her classroom, chalk dust on her fingers, the word proof still glowing on the board. And for everyone watching online, in papers, in whispers across small towns, the lesson was clear. Emotion, trust may be fragile, but proof endures. The trial had ended, but Amelia Clark's life had not returned to normal. It had shifted, slightly but irreversibly, the way a bridge bends after a storm. She was still a teacher. She still stood in front of chalkboards and rows of restless students. Yet something was different now. The students no longer looked at her simply as Miss Clark. the one who turned Shakespeare into song lyrics. They looked at her as someone who had lived the very lesson she had always taught, that truth matters, even when it hurts. On Monday morning, she walked into her classroom carrying nothing but her bag and a small, clear plastic case. The students sat up straighter. Some whispered, some smiled shyly. Amelia set the case on the desk, then picked up a piece of chalk. With steady strokes, she wrote one word across the blackboard in large, white letters. Puro of. Then she turned back to her students and opened the case. Inside lay the reconstructed concert ticket, taped and scarred, stamped with the word, void. This, she said softly, holding it up, was once a lie, but now it's evidence. Proof that betrayal doesn't get the final word. Proof that silence is not safety. Proof that justice listens when you speak. The room was silent, the kind of silence that meant everyone was listening. That evening, Amelia and Rachel Owens stood together at a small community center downtown. Folding chairs filled the room, neighbors and strangers packed shoulder to shoulder. A banner behind them read, Void Trust Community Forum. Rachel took the microphone first. "Negligence in love isn't harmless," she said, her voice carrying steady. "It's injustice waiting to happen. Too often we tell people to move on, to bury their humiliation. But humiliation is not closure. It's evidence. And evidence deserves a hearing." Applause broke out. Then Amelia stepped forward. She looked nervous for a moment, glancing down at her notes, then lifted her eyes to the crowd. "Power with no honor is just noise," she said firmly. "Lead loud, even when you whisper." The words settled into the air like an anthem. Phones in the crowd recorded, lights blinking as her voice was captured, destined for millions of screens beyond that small hall. Back in her classroom the next day, Amelia performed one final act. She took the reconstructed ticket out of its plastic sleeve, tore it neatly in half once more, and slipped the pieces into a small glass display box. On the front, she placed a handwritten label, "Oath, not trust." The students watched silently as she mounted the box on the wall. It was not a trophy. It was not a scarlet letter. It was a reminder. The narrator's voice drifted in. Justice doesn't need fireworks. Sometimes it lives in a single torn ticket, a fragment of paper that tells a story louder than any anthem. Beyond the classroom, the case continued to ripple outward. Advocacy groups launched campaigns to strengthen penalties against romance fraud. State legislators referenced Clark v. Miller in early drafts of new bills. News anchors replayed Amelia's testimony as if it were a mantra. Silence doesn't keep you safe. Proof does. The hashtag #VoidTrust remained alive, not as a trend, but as a movement. Victims shared their stories, supported one another, and found validation in Amelia's stand. What had once been her private humiliation was now a collective call for accountability. Late one evening, Amelia sat alone at her desk. The classroom was quiet, lit only by a desk lamp. She looked at the word still, faintly visible on the chalkboard, proof. She thought of Jason. Not with rage, not with longing, but with a kind of detached clarity. He had sold her a lie, and for a time, that lie had almost silenced her. But lies are fragile when held against the light of evidence. "He sold me a lie," she whispered to herself. But today, that lie bought justice. The line found its way into the public sphere. A reporter quoted her in an article. Students repeated it on social media. TikTok stitched it into video montages of courtroom clips and newspaper headlines. Soon, it was printed on posters at rallies, etched into op-eds, cited in speeches. "He sold me a lie." But today, that lie bought justice. The words lived beyond Amelia, beyond Jason, beyond the trial itself. In her final remarks at the community forum, Amelia addressed not just the crowd, but every unseen listener watching online. If this story reminds you of an injustice you've seen, share it. Share it so the silence breaks. Share it so the next person isn't left outside the gates, holding a ticket marked VOI'd. Proof is stronger when it multiplies. Proof is stronger when it speaks. The camera of the story panned back into her classroom. The torn ticket rested in its glass case, taped lines visible like scars but illuminated under the fluorescent lights. Below it, the chalkboard still bore the single word, prove. The narrator whispered the final lines. Oh, trust can be broken, lies can be sold, but proof endures. And in the end, it is proof, not silence, that writes the last word. E.